Okay, we're going to go ahead and start this special meeting. Thank you all for coming today. I just want to remind you that it is a special meeting. So we do not have public comment today. If there was something you wanted to email us about, you can email, or our regular meeting on the 16th is where we'll have public comment. Also, just remember, please silence your phones, all things like that. If you need to have a conversation or take a call or talk, please just step out so we can quickly get through our items here. And yeah, welcome. Well, did y'all have a chance to look over the addendums of the personnel report? Okay.
Madam Chair, for a motion.
Yes, I'm ready.
I move we approve the personnel report. Second.
Perfect. It was moved by trustee Westfall and seconded by trustee Ross. Any discussion? Yeah. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Excellent. I feel silly saying that, but I feel like I need to give people a chance just in case
No, I like it.
they
Thank
spoke
you.
out of turn. So sorry.
I like it.
Excellent. Handbook is next,
So the
right?
handbook, if you remember at our last meeting, there were 4 points that trustees asked us to clarify. Mr. LeBou is here tonight, but he did meet with the appropriate parties. So if it was high school, then he met with our high school administrators, curriculum issues, and as standards-based grading, met with our district office staff and high school, and then some middle school, high school. So we had included suggest the language that we believe clarify and address the concerns of the trustees from forward.
Simpson?
Yes.
The first item, my question over the standards-based grading, now that I'm seeing kind of what you're proposing back with, it says, my first question was about the 2 different, item number 1 was, actually, my brain works step functions. I'm going to skip to item number 2. Item number 2 was the Otis Raw score. So as it was explained to me, like all the kids do their examples of all their learning on all of the different criterias. They get all their different numbers. And then the Otis does its math and rolls it up into their raw score. Is that what we're looking at here? Is that change? If that's the case, I would love to not have this change. And what you had before was perfect. So go ahead.
Can you say one more? Can you say a little more about that?
Yes, because
Mr. Jarvis, why don't you, we put the high school, the total book in there, why don't we find that section so that it's easy for trustee Ross to reference it? And so that we can.
because my first question is I was confused at the different numbers of the Otis Raw score and in section number 2. As they're going through, and I'll pause for a second. There we go. Okay. So my question go down so we can see 1 and 2. My first question was to the group. Can we see number 1 as well? Thank you. Was what was the difference between the numbers of the Otis Raw score and what was the difference in number 1 when it said A was 4, B was 3? And I was literally just saying, I don't understand, why are they different? And there was a lot of conversation. Ultimately, at the end, Chairman Simpson clarified it when she said, the Otis Raw score is exactly how I explained it, right? You go through all your examples. And I love this table here versus the one you've changed it to. For an example that was given a few months ago by Dr. Russell, when he explained a teacher can give all 3s and maybe 1, 2. And that would drop the average from that 3 to a 2.99. And when he explained that, I thought, I love that, because that still clearly falls here in that B of the 2.99. And so I really appreciated that if a student had almost all 3s and just 1 2, that it still kind of reflected that B and not a C, or that, and same with an A level, that it was at the 3. There are a lot of teachers that really do a lot of 3s across the board too, as, sorry, I'm even saying that backwards, the 2 and the, at the 3, the 1 2, you get the B and not the A, and the other way around. If you get all 3s, it's very hard sometimes for them to put in a 4. And so to get this A, you would have that 1 4, but really a lot of 3s are still that A. So I appreciate the scale. I like the scale. And then Chairman Simpson explained that after that, it rolls over to the letter. So that's your letter grade that goes into PowerSchool. So that made sense to me. And then you go back up to step 1 for the high school folks that are doing the, now convert that to a GPA. And it doesn't go into as far out of decimals until you average it all through the numbers, and then the conversion at the top takes place. So as you said, you were good with this. I'm actually super good with this and would prefer not to do the change in the handbook, as the change in the handbook actually makes it a little harder for students.
Well, so this is the change.
No,
No, it's not.
the changes in the document, there are 4 specific ones. This was the original handbook, so you could see what we were talking about. And
Oh,
then
I
we
see
have
the numbers
Yeah.
that are different.
Just very, very
Yes.
slightly different.
And
Slightly different.
I was looking for that clarification or understanding that I did eventually get, and so I'm good to strike that. I don't know where the other trustees
So an
are.
emotion, I think you could say with the exception of, or whatever, and then we would understand what your intent is.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Superintendent, but there was some conversation around that. I mean,
Yeah.
was the thinking there, was it just to address a board concern, or was there some idea that it was better?
It was trying to address the
Address the board
concern that we
concern.
heard from the board.
Yeah,
Yes.
originally, 3.0 would be proficient work is what we'd want to do as an A level, essentially. With the opportunity, of course, if you can go above and beyond that, you would have higher than that. But so as Trustee Ross had mentioned, the 3 would be an A, that's what we'd like originally, but there was concerns to help it match with the GPA conversion. We could do that as well, just trying to.
I was mostly just confused. Why do they not match? I'm confused of what that is, but I got a good explanation. I'm good with that.
Sorry, I just wanted to clear that
Thank
before
you.
we
And
move to
here
the
full
next
circle, but I
one.
saw a lot of
Yes.
nodding and I knew
Okay.
that you were just trying.
Yeah, excellent. The next one.
Next one.
Immunization.
Immunization. I'll
Did
speak
you
first.
have, yeah, sorry, I thought you were ready for a second.
I
Right.
am. I
Okay.
got one on each, so.
That's okay.
Later in the board packet, we have a great example that they filled out of a draft from Idaho Department of Health and Welfare. So potentially changing the last sentence, because where it talks about potential exclusions. Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, I thought, did a very nice job of that, and even defined it differently per contagious disease. And so I would love it if we changed Southwest District Health, collaboration with Southwest District Health, to Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, since we now have a start of a document that I thought was well done. I think.
So you're just saying as opposed to putting in there
Changing Southwest District Health
to our
Idaho-
district health to the health and
to
welfare.
Idaho Department of Health and Welfare. Because their letterhead was on that document, all the way across that document was from them.
Right, and that is something that we're working with them for the entire state. I wonder, the only question I have on that is the code. Because I think the code references that like the local school board has to refer to the local district health,
Okay.
but I'm not sure. Like, that's the only,
Check code, I
Yeah.
don't have the code book here, I just, yeah. And Southwest actually carried that document to Health and Life.
yeah,
Mhm. So I imagine they'll probably all encompass it, but not sure.
So I hear that if there isn't anything in code that would prevent it, that you would like the word Southwest District Health and you would like it replaced by Idaho Department of Health.
yeah.
And once those finalize, a reference to where parents can find them.
I'm sorry.
Once those guidelines aren't draft anymore, and we have a final document, a reference to where they could see those.
So adding a paragraph that said,
Yeah.
a sentence that says.
Or even changing that last sentence to reference that document.
Yeah.
I think that might be more all encompassing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have anything else on this particular one, or?
I think Kim did a good job identifying the question.
Search of personal items. I was struggling with this one. A school rule being violated was taken out. And then Nampa School District reserving the right to conduct random searches to promote school and student safety. Still felt like we're kind of leaving an open blanket for any admin to be able to search. And so I don't know if there was more conversation on that maybe we should hear.
We did have our legal attorney review it, and maybe Mr. LaLue does have additional comments.
Yes.
Okay.
So really what it came down to is the difference between probable cause and reasonable suspicion. And keeping the language, or to have the language reflect the way that it does, it allows school officials to be more proactive and to meet a lesser threshold in order to keep students safe. The legal threshold is greater, and sometimes that could result in administrators responding, not being able to respond in a timely manner to a concern.
So I reached out to the SRO supervisor, kind of with that same question, to say, how do you guys operate? What are your thoughts on this? Is this something that, we need? And he mentioned the same thing. He says, we really follow the Fourth Amendment for search and seizure, that we don't do that unless there's probable cause, which I appreciated, and went ahead and sent him this and said, so potentially maybe should we add the words reserves the right, given probable cause, to conduct random searches. He was able to, I think, get it to his supervisor and to their HR department. And they came back and said, we really like the existing verbiage of reasonable suspicion exists, that a crime has been committed. They said they couldn't think of a potential reason why they would need a random search, and to strike the last sentence. And so I was trying to think through everything, because we said the same thing. How do we keep our students safe? And how do we still respect their Fourth Amendment? And I just thought through just experiences that I had heard of. And so, right, like high schoolers, the dogs show up every now and again. And if they find something, the dog points, that's reasonable cause, right? Then we'll search. But we don't do random searches of cars. Like at my work, we'll do random drug testing, where that company will draw random names and that's who gets tested that month. And so to me, this random search is kind of that at random, like we're drawing names and saying this is what's happening. And I don't think that's what we want to do, but I do think if there's a reasonable suspicion, and everybody liked that word, that there was a reasonable suspicion. If a student said, hey, I saw so-and-so had a knife in their backpack, or I heard that so-and-so had a knife in their backpack, that would be a reasonable suspicion and that backpack should be searched. to keep our kids safe before something were to happen, before that knife was used on another student. So,
Trustee Ross,
Yeah.
would you consider the dogs walking the hall a random search? That's the legal authority that we believe that gives us. And it's all associated with making sure that school is safe and students are safe. And that sentence was added because in the first one, you could construe that that's the only thing a school can ever do. And we felt like that was too limiting and didn't allow us to act as in loco parenti or to continue the practice that we have of maintaining those searches with the dogs.
Madam Chair, Superintendent, does this paragraph describe every adult, like would it be the police and school staff?
So the police are held to probable cause and cannot conduct searches on our campus without that higher burden. We, under law, can conduct those searches with reasonable suspicion. And so I think I missed the essence of your question, Trustee Westphal.
I think she's asking, is it any adult in the building? If I'm teaching
No.
in a
not
classroom,
in our building,
yeah,
no.
but I think that's what the last sentence can be. And then that was the conversation that Ezra and I had, was that last sentence really opens up the opportunity for any administrator to stop any student at any time. Because you're reserving that right.
So are we moving from administrator and I heard any adults? Oh, administrators do have the responsibility to keep their campus safe.
For sure. Yeah, and I guess I'm trying to truly do both, protect, right? All our kids come in and driving onto school, that any administrator isn't searching vehicles and whatnot and book bags or whatever at any time. And there's a fine line there. And so I would like to just have in writing that we're doing what we're saying we're going to do and we're saying what we're going to do.
And I just want to add, instead of I protecting, it's we who want to protect both our ability and our students' rights too. That's a desire that the district has. I wonder, Mr. Walker, if you would like to comment on this
Just
paragraph.
the one point with regard to employees. Basically, that would be the police who have to come in and conduct any type of a search with the probable cause standard. The administrators couldn't do that, and they wouldn't do that. And this is a student handbook, so it wouldn't apply under my understanding to that situation. With regard to the wording here, I think it allows the random dog searches adequately, but also protects an administrator from just picking on a student one day, saying, you know what, I don't like Joe today, I want to go check his backpack. Because he'd have to articulate some reasonable suspicion, not just that he doesn't like Joe. So I think it does protect the students, but also balances the ability of administration to protect the students too.
I'm sorry, as I was just reading through it, the question came to mind because we don't have any dogs that search that we own as a district. So it reserves the right to have the police come in and do that random search with their dogs.
Yes, the police would have to come in and do that, correct.
That was one wording I had on there. I suggested, could we say reserve the right for law enforcement to conduct random searches? And their response was, we would not want to hamper any potential incident if we weren't there at the time. So we would prefer not to be specifically worded in your handbook, was their request. But I was trying to search for some of those same thoughts and ideas. And anyway, that was the feedback that came back. So.
Trustee Ross, if we included a statement which reflects the conversation we're having, which says the district would like to protect both the school and the district to act in loco parenti and the student's Fourth Amendment, or however go rights together. So that's the policy statement, right? That's our desire, that we want to create that environment where rights are protected, and yet a parent or someone acting in a parent role would be able to make sure that the bedroom is safe, that our rooms are safe, that the gym is safe, that the football field is safe. And we could add a philosophical statement, which then maybe ease your mind about I'm gonna pick on you today in the hallway.
Right, and the feedback that came back was they felt that the existing verbiage that was already there covered that adequately in their mind without the addition of the last statement. I don't know if our legal feels the same way. And I don't know. I'm with everybody just trying to be in between both.
Yeah, the random searches are more of a kind of a, for lack of a better term, kind of a preemptive measure to prevent a problem before it happens. Maybe you've heard a rumor that maybe someone has a gun in their locker and you don't know. You can conduct random searches or maybe search everybody, because if you search everybody, it's random too. And then you identify the person with the weapon. And also understand that, for example, lockers are not private, those aren't protected. So the schools can go into lockers, desks, anything that's school owned at any time. The only thing that's protected would be backpacks. Personal items actually personal to the student. So there's a lot of protection, but also a lot of discretion for the district to protect the students.
And I think in consultation with our legal, when we change that first sentence, in order for it not to be construed so narrowly that it limited our rights that we legally have, we felt like that last sentence needed to be added so that we didn't lose the legal right to do what the law already grants us to do.
So if the law already grants us that, do we need it in there, or do we need to just continue with reasonable suspicion and remove that a crime has been committed so that we as a district aren't so narrowly pinpointed?
Well,
Still,
I think about like all the possible cases, and I understand like that a school rule has been violated. It's very general, right? And encompasses all the school rules. But I do feel like there are school rules that could be violated. That doesn't mean a crime has been committed
yeah,
necessarily.
so I'm like, we can
But there might
pull
be
that out.
something, so that it either, and what I heard was that with those, a school rule has been violated or that a crime, right, has been committed. By taking those out, the feeling was that last sentence needed to be added there.
Right, and so I agree with you, and so I'm totally tracking with you, and so we could maybe take out the fully general sentence at the bottom and also the extremely pointed, literally all of that red, and leave the black there, because then searches are still conducted when a reasonable suspicion exists, which truly is what we're gonna do. We're not gonna do it unless there is a reasonable suspicion.
But could be construed that we have given up our legal right to walk the dog through there randomly. So when you leave just that sentence,
Okay,
it could be interpreted that we have given up the legal right to walk a dog through there.
And also the reasonable suspicion would apply only to a single individual. And if you've had a concern about that's broader and more general, but you don't have a specific individual attached, you don't have reasonable suspicion, even though you have a concern that maybe there is a crime being committed. And the random searches helps you to deal with that situation,
for multiple people.
right, or unknown specific.
And we wouldn't be legally covered for those instances unless we added this last sentence into our handbook.
That puts people on notice. That might happen. I think you can still do it anyway, but it puts the parents and students on notice that that's a possibility.
Questions? Discussion?
Everybody's on notice.
So the fourth one, that grade level promotion.
Was good with that.
Any, okay. Excellent. There are no other comments or questions. Specifically, I would entertain the motion.
Madam Chair, I move we approve, and I'm working off the document revisions to 2021.
Yeah.
Items 2 and 3 and 4 for inclusion in the handbook on the document revisions to the 2021 handbook. Leaving out the,
Great, just the grade portion for right now. Because then it would go, leaving out the grade would put it back to what it is.
right,
And then
Correct.
perhaps we could include in approving the whole handbook since
Yeah,
we
'cause
put
we
that
didn't
on
do that.
hold while these revisions were in process.
Yes.
okay.
So eventually tonight, that would be great to approve of the high school and middle school handbooks.
Okay, so I'm gonna say it again to make sure I heard it
Yeah.
correctly. You're moving to approve the revisions to the revision number 2, 3, and 4,
Yes,
which would leave that number 1 revision
Right.
as it was.
With the suggestion of Idaho Department of Health and Welfare inserted on number
2, replacing Southwest District Health.
Do you want that in your motion?
yeah, I'm happy to include that.
Okay, then I'll second. that.
Great.
So the motion was approved or moved, sorry, by trustee Westfall, seconded by trustee Ross. Tammy, do you feel like you got the motion? Or do you need some more time?
But the microphones are on, it would help if you guys.
Oh. No more discussion, questions? Okay, I felt like no. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Passes.
Madam Chair, I move we approve the middle school and high school district sections of the handbook.
The mic, I can't, it's hard to hear you, Allison. Trustee Westphal, sorry.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the middle school district and the high school district sections of the handbook.
I'll second that. So it was moved by trustee Westfall, seconded by Chairman Simpson. Any discussion?
No, obviously that will include the revisions that we just
Yes.
approved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Those are approved.
So we are really pleased tonight to have Leslie Leonard with us. She currently is acting lead at Pathways in Education, and she's here for our annual update on the key indicators that represent what Pathways in Education seeks to do.
Good evening, trustees, Superintendent Keller, ladies and gentlemen of the audience. I am Leslie Leonard, and I'm currently the interim principal. And we're gonna go over kind of what we worked on this past year, this crazy past year that we went through, and then our focus for this next year as we go forward. Over the past year, we worked on skills growth, student engagement and re-engagement, getting them back involved into school, credit recovery pace, enrollment, student mental health and academic success through distance learning, that was a tough one, and our school culture. How we focused on skills growth over the past year, we do internal monitoring through Renaissance STAR testing, which is a computer adapted test. It's used for our data purposes to show us growth in math and reading. And usually we are able to test during the fall, the winter, and the spring. This past year, it was a little more difficult with the distance learning, but we did have all 3 tests we were able to give all 3 tests. And we had 95% of our students participate in those tests, which was pretty good for last year's craziness. Many of our students, and I would say most of our students, are testing well below their national peers, roughly 2 years below grade level in math and reading. And I had this sort of kind of made so that you could kind of see by grade level where they are all testing. So what are we doing to build skill growth at Pathways? We have a lot of interventions. The first one is we have small group instruction, which is a little more traditional classroom with 12 to 15 students in those classes. We have small group instruction in math, science, and English, also in speech. We have summer remedial math classes as well as Achieve Literacy. And all kids who are testing in the urgent category for remediation, we have them go through Achieve Literacy. We also have a full-time math tutor. We teach study skills, coping skills. We also work on goal setting, and we have teacher-led tutoring for English and math from 1 to 3 every afternoon. We require all of our students to set goals, and we try to go back and look at those goals at least 3 times a year. We call those achievement chats. So 3 times a year, each student sits down with the teacher to set new goals for what they are working towards. We measure student growth in 2 ways this last year. I have an error there. I'm sorry, that says 0.4, but we measure students who have made a half a year of growth, and then students who are a year plus growth in those academics. For half year growth, 59% of our students hit reading and 71% of our students hit math. Students who made at least 1 year growth, reading was 43 and math was 55. 55% of our students participate in those small group instruction classes that I was talking about, and that is a slight decrease from years past because it was all distance learning and the students really struggled to stay on camera. 65% of our students average at least 1 credit per month, which is a decrease of about 4%. Prior to COVID, we were up around 69, almost 70% of our students were gaining 1 credit per month. And during distance learning, we measured engagement with students. And we did that via weekly contact and class participation. Each of our students would get on Google Meets with teachers at least twice a week to work on tutoring or whatever they needed to in order to get ahead. And 92% of our students engaged in weekly participation throughout that crazy year that we had. Another way that we engage students is through travel. We offer students to travel. It's free to students. Last year, obviously, that was pretty much wiped out. This year, however, in October, we're taking 28 kids to Washington, DC for 5 days. And then in the spring, we're going to take 6 students on a World War II tour in France, Belgium, England, Germany, and Poland. We also try to provide our students with at least 1 monthly field trip out into the Treasure Valley. Already we've been to the Boise Zoo this summer, but we're also going to do glass blowing. We do hiking. I have a group of kids that are going to go see the Hamilton play later in the year. So we try to get kids out and engaged in that way as well. Credit recovery and PACE. On average, almost 90% of our students are enrolling credit deficient. So that has been pretty steady across all 4 years that we've been open. Pre-COVID, about 61% of our students were working at a graduation pace that would get them graduated in 4 years after 2 months of being enrolled. That dropped with distance learning to about 53% of those students. 68% of our students who were seniors at the first of the year last year graduated. That's an internal metric for us because we don't always look at the 4-year grad cohort. We often look at the 5-year grad cohort. But during last year, we only lost 7 seniors. Anyone who didn't graduate is still enrolled and is working towards graduation at this point. Last year, we graduated 53 students, which we were pretty excited about. Most of those were during distance learning. We struggled a little bit with enrollment last year. It was tough for us to stay at capacity. We didn't reach capacity. Our current enrollment is about 205 students. We're technically a year-round school, so most of that, probably a lot of that has to do with the fact that most kids aren't going to school at this time, and we did graduate 53 students. Nampa School District is still the first priority for enrollment at Pathways Always, and we're looking to maintain an enrollment of 300. One of our focuses last year was going to be advanced opportunities. That was a little bit tough for us because, well, we were all in distance learning, but we did offer driver's ed on campus. We had, I think, approximately 20 students enrolled at CWI and TVCC, and we did offer SAT preparatory classes online. We also, just to say, our SATs, we had 97% of our students show up for SATs, which is pretty incredible for us, and we did do that in person, so that was really nice. Focus areas for this next year, increasing advanced opportunities for our students is always going to be something that we're focusing on. Re-engaging students, getting them back physically into the building is going to be a challenge. Most of our kids got full-time jobs during distance learning, and because we have kind of a different attendance, a lot of them are struggling to leave their jobs and come back to school, which is kind of scary. We're going to be doing targeted math and reading skills growth for our strategic planning this year, increasing academic expectations, increasing our retention, increasing the student goal setting and future planning. We really feel that it's very important for our students, especially because they're behind in credits to work on future planning. Increasing the number of students that are on pace for four-year graduation would be an amazing goal for us. And we hope to maintain 100% compliance in our special education. That's all I have. I'm free to answer any questions.
Questions or comments, trustees?
Thank you for your presentation, for being here.
Thank you so much for your time. Yeah.
And I had just a quick question. You said your priority was Nampa School District students.
Yes.
Do you know what percentage of your kiddos are from?
I would say probably 70%. We do also pull from as far out as Mountain Home.
Okay.
So we have, yeah, that's a crazy drive. But we have kids from Boise, Nampa, Meridian, obviously, Parma, surrounding areas. We had some driving in from Fruitland, which is quite a drive too. So, but a majority, I would say over 70% are Nampa students.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next presentation tonight comes from Rick Jordan, who is our principal at Treasure Valley Leadership Academy. Rick also is our principal at Park Ridge, which this fall, if you remember, will be a K-6. Treasure Valley Leadership will move to an 8-12. And he's reporting because TVLA is an innovation school and we're required to hear this report annually.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I want to duly noted, this is the earliest in August I've ever worn a tie. So some of our highlights and success that I'll talk about is some of our leadership opportunities that our kids have had and then hopefully will have in the future because COVID went sideways a little bit on some of the things we'd love to do. Our online hybrid and change in leadership that I think happened during the middle of the year, and then some of our academics, and then talk a little bit about our enrollment and how we will in the future try to increase that enrollment. So, Peter. So, community engagement projects during the COVID year made it a little more difficult to get out and be in the community. But our student created and led our recruiting effort to our middle schools to try to get our freshmen in, and they actually helped with recruiting for our 8th graders that were trying to come in also. And so that was really cool to watch that happen, that interaction and the ownership that they took on that. Our seniors, we had our first graduating class, and even for a principal who took over in October and for a while didn't feel like he had ownership, it wasn't just the freezing cold wind in the park that day that gave me goosebumps. It was listening to our kids talk about the experience that they had had and where they had come in 4 years. And the fact that if TVLA hadn't been there, they may not be walking across that stage. So that was pretty cool. But they planned and implemented that whole graduation process. And just to see that leadership come through was amazing. And our students also assisted in traveling table, which they've been doing for years. Also, our students, and again, COVID knocked this down until late in the year. But our high school students mentored our elementary kids, and that's going to continue. And it's amazing on both sides of that line, what it does for the mentor and the mentee. Just that pride that I saw in some of our high school kids that I didn't see in other aspects of their day when they came back from meeting with one of their students and just talking about how they had helped that student. And again, not just academically, sometimes it was, but just in life in general, it was really cool to watch. With support academics, behaviors throughout the day. And then they have their own student mentoring. So each student has a mentor teacher that they meet with a minimum of one time a week. This last COVID year, they met typically through Zoom on those Wednesdays when we didn't have in-person class. But then also once we came back into the hybrid and then fully, they also met with their mentors daily, and we also meet as a crew. And so they meet as crews, and they changed it to crew because in our K8, our K6, with our expeditionary learning, we call it crew. And we talk about being a crew, not a passenger, or part of a crew and not a passenger. And so that's kind of one of the things that we really talk about. So embedded in community engagement within the class structure allows students they create a community within their class with that crew. And that helps them go out into the community and then make their community better. So it allows student teams to collaborate effectively around opportunities to build up the community, the traveling table again. And this next year, we have 4 teachers. I've replaced 3 and 1 counselor, also replaced her. The cool thing is that I hired really great people. And so I took them to dinner last night and we talked about it being TVLA 2.0 with COVID kind of doing this to us. And now all these new ideas that are going to come in, we're really excited about what we're doing and where we're headed. And so again, that traveling table, our kids are heavily involved in. Go up here, thank you. So the online hybrid, and again, new leadership staff was amazing and flexible this last year. And I think we changed our schedule 4 or 5 times to meet the needs of our kids because we would try something, it was like, oh, this isn't quite working. So we would tweak the schedule and we would talk to the kids about what do you need? And that's the nice thing about TVLA is we really get that student input on what do you need? You take responsibility for your learning and help us then help you. Again, I took over, I am still drinking through a fire hose with Learning Summit Learning and what all that entails. I went through some training this summer and I meet monthly with someone from Summit. And they're great with just helping me. And one of the big things I will be doing this year is really diving into our data. I don't think I did a great job of that last year, but I was trying to recruit kids to a middle school and again, just trying to get my feet underneath me. So I'll do a better job of that this next year. But again, that weekly communication, academic mentoring continued through the crisis. And our student engagement stayed consistent throughout the crisis, as hard as it was. Our PSAT scores, I'll time read this on. We have 55%. So we're with our PSAT, and I'm not going to read them out to you. Our PSAT and our SAT scores are above or right around district average. Again, obviously math, and I think math in COVID took a huge hit because kids read all the time, whether on their phones, on a device, whatever, but they don't sit around and do math problems on their own. And I really think that was hard because I talked with my math teacher and she is maybe the hardest working person I know. And so we're brainstorming on how to get those math scores back up. You go ahead. Our enrollment improvement plan, again, I kind of walk in the middle of this, and then it was also COVID. So that made it harder to go out and recruit students. So we're going to continue representing TVLA at middle school to utilize student ambassadors. We will get out earlier this year, and we will get out more often this next year. We're going to continue to advertise on social media about our K-12 school model. And this is the year we actually get to show it off. Because last year we didn't get to really say, hey, come see what we're doing. This year, we're going to be saying, here's what we're doing. We're going to have what we call celebrations of learning. This is K-12. We'll have celebrations of learning where we'll invite the community to come in to showcase what we've learned on a project or at the lower level in our expeditions. And again, we'll get out in the community and engage in projects to say, here's what we're doing. I love the energy already in my building right now. I love the energy. And there's furniture and junk everywhere in our hallways, but the people that we have coming in, and I have 8 new people in a school of 350 kids. I have 8 new people, and I have 8 other people who are still in our building, but in a different position. So we have lots of moving parts going on right now, but the cool thing is there's so many ideas coming together right now. And we're so excited to get our kids here that we're just chomping at the bit to get to our kids. I want to look here and see if I'm looking at numbers right now. I think we have 31 to 32 sixth graders that are coming in. Right now we have 11 eighth graders. We found it was hardest to ask kids to switch schools. I think that will start to steamroll as we get people to go, oh, wow, what are they actually doing over there? I think word of mouth, I think our kids that we're going to have in our building this year are going to be our best advertisements. Because we got well over half of our fifth graders that were at Park Ridge are staying with us. And I think that's great advertisement right there. So I think that sixth grade class is the one that's really going to start to steamroll, and you'll see our enrollment start to change. We did have 35% of our kids going to some sort of advanced opportunities this summer. We have a community partnership with Amazon. I'm not sure if you remember this. And again, I'm talking K-12, but TVLA was part of this. They delivered 2,000 books to our school. I'm also going to partner with the Idaho Business for Education because I need those community partnerships. I want the community to know what we're doing. I want my kids out in the community. One of our mottos is the community is our classroom. And so that's that's our mindset to get our kids into community engagement, TVLA, expeditions, and the expeditionary learning. So that's all I have. If you have any questions.
Yes. I'm actually really curious. You talked about you kind of visited with students to find out what helped them through the crisis and that you changed schedules. I'm really curious to know what was their input of what helped them.
Well, so our kids with the Summit Learning, some of theirs, it's called SDL, Student Directed Learning. It's not a study hall because they have specific things they can look at on Summit to go, okay, I need to work on this and then take a quiz. And they asked for more time to do that. So we shortened some classes just a little bit so that they felt like they could go out and do their independent learning. Yeah.
That's good input. I mean, yet last year was a hard year and there were a lot of changes to schedule to hear from kids what worked for them.
Well, and that's the culture at TVLA though, is, and it took me a few days but they call us by our first names. So in the back half of the hallway, I'm Mr. Jordan, because I'm the principal of the K-5, and in the front hallway, or one wing, I am Rick. And it was like, but what that does is it helps level the playing field where they feel like we're not peers necessarily, because we're not, but we're also not this authoritarian telling them what's going to happen to them. It's how are we going to help you be successful? And again, if you were at graduation, it was amazing to listen to those kids talk.
One more follow-up question. I didn't follow your PSAT, SAT percentage slide very
I'm sorry.
well. Can you help me understand these numbers?
Those are proficient.
So 18% met proficiency to the SAT, though their level of proficiency, and they give you a number of
Yep.
what that is.
Yep.
Thank you.
You've worked in a traditional public school and now you're in our innovation school.
Yes.
What's there that makes it, what's different, I guess, as a school leader? Or could we do this without being an innovation school?
Again, from what I know about it, again, is looking at, especially like with the elective courses, we don't necessarily have those elective courses like Spanish to take, like art necessarily to take. And so from a state point of view, at least right now, from what I know, I think the innovation part of it needs to stay. Because we don't quite function like when I was at Skyview. We don't have, we have the 4 cores. And then we have community engagement. And I think that's one of the biggest differences, is our kids have that flexibility to have community engagement. My high school people are working with my middle school people to develop passion projects for our kids. So some of those ideas will come from the teachers, and then some of those ideas are also going to come from our students. I think in the big comprehensive high schools, that's harder to do. That makes sense.
I
Okay,
was just curious of your perspective because
I'd love to have you guys give us a month and then come see what we're doing.
the kids were great. They really were.
Yeah, they were amazing. Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Tonight we've invited our attorney, Brett Walther, to just update the board on case law related to the rights of transgender students and staff. There have been a lot of changes recently. And as a public entity, you know that we get to follow law. And so we just thought it was important for you to be aware of the current changes and how it will impact.
Good morning, or good morning, yes, good afternoon. It's a long day. Well, unlike Mr. Jordan, I surrendered to the heat and I ditched my jacket and my tie. Standing here today in my short sleeves. I'm going to talk primarily about 3 cases. And it's a good kind of a cross section of where the transgender law is currently, and they're all very recent cases, 2020 or later. The first one talks about what a school district can do to accommodate a transgender student. The second one talks about what a school district must do to accommodate a transgender student. And then the third one talks about the employment context of the adverse employment actions you can or cannot take with regard to an employee because they're transgender. So I'll start with the first one, 9th Circuit case, and I'm going to tell you the name of it just because that's what attorneys do. Parents for Privacy versus Barr. 9th Circuit is the circuit that controls Idaho. So we pay very close attention to 9th Circuit decisions. And that case involved a school district in Oregon that had a transgender boy. And just for definition purposes, transgender boy was identified at birth as a female and then self-identifies later as a boy. So refer to them as a transgender boy. So this transgender boy wanted to use the bathroom that he associated himself with rooms, bathrooms, locker rooms and showers. This Oregon School District said, yes, we will allow you to use boys' locker room, boys' shower, and boys' restroom. And a group of parents got together, they didn't like it, and some of the students, and filed an action in our district court and said, you know, this is violating our rights to privacy, it's violating our students' rights because they're being sexually harassed because they don't want to see a female body, although he self-identifies as a boy, in the locker room or the shower or the bathroom. And we need to have the choice and the freedom to make that choice. So there were a lot of those, even religious freedom argument that was made. And the district court listened to all their arguments and dismissed the case under Rule 12b-6, which is extremely unusual. The standard is there's no legal basis for your claims, and so we're kicking them out of court. There's no jury in the world can find for you because there's no legal basis for any of your decisions. So the parents and the students filed an appeal with the Ninth Circuit. And the Ninth Circuit affirmed the decision of the district court and said, basically granting school districts the discretion to accommodate a transgender student in these three areas. So if the school district does that, they aren't going to be legally liable for not making a different decision. So it gives you discretion. It doesn't say you have to do all of those things. Don't take this decision too far. It just says if you do, you're not violating any parent or student rights. So that's the first one, talking about what the school district can do. Now, the second one is a recent decision by the Supreme Court to deny certification of a Fourth Circuit case, Grimm versus Gloucester County School Board. And that was a case, this is the flip side of the Oregon case. There you had a transgender boy that wanted to use the boys' bathrooms, and they said, no, you can't. We'll give you this bathroom over here, but you're not going to use the common boys' bathroom. They prohibited it. The student filed suit and prevailed at the district court level. And that was appealed then by the school district saying, no, they don't have that right. And that was affirmed by the Fourth Circuit and said that decision of the district court was affirmed and said, no, they have that right. The boys get to use the restroom of their choice, period. End of discussion. Now, the significance of the Supreme Court denying certification on that issue means that's it. That is the rule that all school districts must follow with regard to bathrooms. They expressly stated that we have not addressed showers or locker rooms in this decision. So those are areas still within the discretion of a school district, school board. That's not to say a future case won't happen where a district court or a circuit court rules you must give them the locker room or the shower of their choice. But at this point, it's an open decision, open case. And so you have the discretion to choose either way, at least as far as violating the law. Now, the third one is another Supreme Court case, and that's Bostic versus Clayton County. And that is an employment discrimination case under Title VII. And in that case, the court found that went all the way back up to the Supreme Court, and they affirmed it, that an employee was terminated in part because of his transgender status. And Title VII has what's called a substantial factor test. If one part of your decision, even if it's only 10%, is for a prohibited reason, race, gender, age, whatever your protected classification is, in this case, transgender, then you violate Title VII. And you have to have pay damages, reinstate the employee, whatever the situation may be. Now, there was a lot of this debate, if you want to read this nice long opinion, that's 47 pages, amongst the justices about, oh my gosh, now we're opening up the workplace to locker rooms and showers and other accommodations that you're seeing in Title IX. And to get a plurality opinion that more justices have not agreed to, they basically had to say expressly, this case does not address the situation with regard to restrooms lockers, or showers in the workplace amongst employees. It only addresses substantial factor test that says you cannot discriminate and take an adverse employment action against an employee because of their transgender status. So it's a very narrow opinion, but it's an important one, both with regard to what it does decide and what it doesn't decide. There's still open questions out there. But that's kind of where we are right now. And I like that there's, 3 cases that kind of show what you can do, what you must do, and then in the employment context where they are. Anyways, that was a lot in a short amount of time. I got a stack of case law I read is about that thick to summarize this in the 3 pages. But if you have any questions, shoot away.
Questions?
It was super thorough. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, it's just one I didn't. I know when you enroll in our schools, we have to check a birth certificate is required by law. And make sure the kid.
Right.
But do we have to ask about gender?
You'll take the birth certificate you receive. And there's a debate as to whether or not birth certificates can be amended later based on gender changes. That's outside the scope of this discussion, but you can ask for the birth certificate and you just take what you get as far as what their gender is identified as. Your main thing is you want to figure out this kid's with this parent and,
Yeah.
you've got the right kid. Whether it's a boy or a girl at this point in time is probably much less important.
And are all these taken up within the individual and the principal of the school? This is a matter held between those 2 parties.
Yeah, we actually had a conversation just yesterday about kind of how we're going to have a process, and it's not easy. My advice is to work with the family in a collaborative manner and find out really what they want, kind of like a disability accommodation meeting. You sit down with them, you don't direct them, you don't hint with them, figure out what they want, what they prefer, you brainstorm with them, and they might have an accommodation that is not, I want to take showers with my preference. It might be, I want to use my restroom, but the other stuff, I'll have another accommodation. In the one case, the Parents for Privacy versus Bar, the reason the locker rooms and the showers wasn't addressed is because the student chose himself not to do that. Not the Bar case, the second case, the Grimm case. The Supreme Court denied cert. He decided he didn't want to use the showers or the locker rooms. So that decision, that was never addressed by that case. So there are many cases. I mean, every student, every family is going to be different. They're going to have different preferences. So my recommendation on the first step is to get together with the family and figure out how best to accommodate this student. And then
Which
take
is
it,
our
then you
current
take it,
practice.
yeah, then you take it from there.
In our board policies, we have non-discrimination statements, and are there other policies you would see need coming to the board, or is this an
We're going
administrative?
to be working on updating the current policies and procedures with regard to gender discrimination, Title IX, generally. We'll present that to the board for review and approval, hopefully. So short answer is yes, we have them, but they will probably need some revisions.
And this would be ones for students and for our employees.
Yes, yeah, because there's slightly different standards for both. All right, very good. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoroughness. Thank you.
All right, so we have shared with you the draft. So we shared a couple of examples with Southwest District Health. Southwest District Health took a couple of those documents and sent them to Idaho Department of Health and Welfare. Idaho Department of Health and Welfare with representatives from all of their regional health entities talked about the structure of the document, what they wanted to include in it. And what you have is just a draft, and they asked for feedback. Administration has looked at it. There are a few places where If they insist on head lice is an example, where what they suggest for head lice is different than what we have written in policy. So we've gone through that and said, hey, we maybe need to think about this. There are a few other cases where they created some symbols, like this one has an immunization, this one doesn't, and they missed some of those key things. So we've offered that feedback, but they really wanted the board's perspective. And so tonight, what we're hoping to do is to listen to your perspective. What do you find useful? Where are your concerns? And how might you see us using this document?
Next questions.
I liked it. I thought it was pretty thorough. I liked all the different. It's just super informative.
Yeah.
I did notice the same thing that the superintendent brought up about the head lice. I actually, and then I couldn't remember exactly how our policy read. And I liked, and I noticed this one said that the parent would be notified. I think ours, I didn't know if ours was that we're not notifying parents, but I remember now we're not notifying like all the kiddos in the same classroom. And this didn't mention any of that either. Either way anyway, so
I think it did recommend exclusion, and that is not our current practice.
until it was treated,
Yes.
which would be nice, like, I can agree with that. And I know that's something, you know, personal at home, but kind of all of this was, and so. I didn't see anything.
Incorporated several other documents into this. We have quite a lengthy document that reminds us what is mandatory reporting, what's mandatory within 24 hours, which is reporting that we only may have to do. So they've incorporated some of those other documents that we have to go out and find and have put it into this document. We found that really helpful instead of looking in several different places to remind ourselves when we have something like whatever that first item is that we might not deal with right now.
And I was just wondering, you know, I put my parent hat on, and because with COVID, we had these experiences with, you know, close contact is defined as, you know, certain number of minutes and this close of a range. And so they were, you know, we were kind of using that as we were making decisions. And I was curious on some of them, what that close contact would be. You know, and earlier I had said, or previous meeting, like, say it's measles, you know, a kindergartner, another wing of the building never encounters the unvaccinated fifth grader. And how might that be? So I was curious about that. I appreciate, go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of liked though that it did talk about all of the other children potentially in that same manner, but that it was just specific to that case.
Yeah.
So I get that it was excluded, but I kind of appreciated that because it's still that idea that those parents can really be aware and decide for themselves, but it's really the one that has been found that really that is what has to be dealt with of that case.
Yeah. So then kind of zooming it more to a board level where we exclude kids,
right,
who aren't vaccinated, and that's where I was, you just, you know, is it going to be a blanket, you know, everyone in the school building, or and it may not be that sophisticated of information.
And that's nice, right? They told you, well, is that one that even has a vaccine available to it or not, or the X on there.
I'm sorry, ladies, we can't hear any of you, especially Allison.
I'm sorry, I do have a soft voice, so I'll do my best. I'm not a teacher, don't have a teacher voice.
Thank
So-
you. Yeah, sometimes just moving the mic up, you know, just a little closer helps.
Yeah. So I had observed that there is information that we don't, that doesn't aid the decision-making for a board when you have to exclude students from school.
I felt like, looking through the lens of this last year and then, our role, to me, this felt like a really good document in one that it's all there, right? Like you said, Superintendent Keller, that it's all in one place. You don't have to search in multiple different places, which makes it really nice. To me, the other piece was, yeah, it didn't give specifics, but I felt like the exclusion stuff were the things that were contacting Southwest District Health anyway. And so there's that connection, right? That if they need to provide us with more information, or we need, they need other information from us about, was anybody else in the room, or what played out, like those are things that I felt like kind of were covered within it as well.
And actually, if you look, like diphtheria was one of them. What's up right now?
Measles.
Oh, and so I think they noted if it's a big deal for the contacts versus the case, they noted it in here. And so I think they, kind of use that, well, allergies, no worries with contacts. So they didn't have it there. But to the certain infectious diseases or pathogens that did have a concern, they noted it.
Yeah, I think my concerns, similar to what you said, are there things that we're not doing, that we're like, wait, why do we need to do that for
Yeah,
this?
and we were actually surprised when it came back because our change in practice was recommended by the Department of Health and Welfare. So we'll walk through that. There
Okay.
are several other districts giving feedback. We expect some of that stuff to rise to the top. And then my understanding is it would go back to Idaho Department of Health and Welfare for a final revision and approval
What do you mean our change in practice?
related to head lice.
Oh.
And then do we feel like this is a document? I mean, to me, I feel like this is a document that we can reference and choose to adopt, right, as a district to reference in these.
Sure, or and just simply reference, but our school nurses who have to implement many of these things
Yeah.
felt like it was a useful document, felt like there was enough flexibility and yet some really clear direction, which really helped in some decision.
Excellent.
Thank you, Allison, for urging this on. I don't think this document would have been created without your request.
I don't know about that, but I'm glad to see it.
I think
Yeah.
so, yeah. I think it's very inclusive.
We'll share that feedback with them as well as the feedback from our nurses. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Was there other feedback from the nurses and administrators?
We sat down together, so really it's the same thing that I talked about. There are a couple of places where we either will have to reconsider our policy and procedures or talk with them through that. And then it did seem like some of the information wasn't quite complete, or as we understood it to be complete. So, does measles have a vaccination, and did they require that? Is it a excludable thing? And not all of those little symbols were attached to each of the places that there are other documents that they should be. So just some little tiny checking for accuracy. All right, art adoption. We have Lori Ma. I don't know who all we have here. We have lots of people here to talk with us about where we are in art curriculum adoption.
Yes. So I'm Lori Mine, I'm the Director of Curriculum and Instruction. And go ahead, you're first up there. I'm Michelle Tripp, I'm the principal at Centennial Elementary.
And I'm Christina Wilkins and I teach art at Napa High School. So trustees, thank you. We're happy to be here tonight to present where we are in adopting our curriculum. Right now, we have 10 art teachers for grades 6 through 12. And so I want to just note that this is a 6 through 12 adoption. We have about 2,100 students taking art. So that's a lot of students for those 10 teachers. But also we want to create really great experiences for them in their art classes. Currently, we have a text in high school. It's about 25 years old, and you have heard this repeatedly in our adoptions as we go through our cycle that it's time that we adopt some updated things. So we're excited to have some foundation curricular resources for our art classes. Just a note on this, this is a 6-12 adoption, but we have 2 elementary schools who art is really central to their focus, and that's Centennial Elementary and also Park Ridge with their expeditionary learning. And so we wanted to have them be part of this discussion and then pilot some of those elementary things as we start thinking about elementary art. And we had a great convergence of talent where Michelle Tripp is the principal at Centennial, our art focus school, and she's also done a lot of curriculum adoptions for our district before, so she was able to help with the facilitation. And Christy has been leading the artwork in 6-12 for a long time. So they came together to do a good job.
So we just wanted to brief you on the process. It's the same process that all the adoptions in the district are using. First off, we do prep work, and that was Christy and I working together to put together the pieces in place to recruit parents, to recruit teachers, to recruit student feedback, to put all those pieces in place so we could have a really robust adoption. And then our committee's work was the second piece, where we actually brought our committee of teachers, parents, and our feedback committee together. And then our post-committee work, which will come once we make a recommendation to you, which isn't today. We'll make a recommendation once we finalize everything and bring that to the next board meeting. And this gives a little more detail on each of the phases. So this is something that instead of reading through all of this right now, I'm happy to if you want me to. Yay. Or it's available on the board documents page, and you can ask any questions you want when we're done with our presentation, if you have any questions about any parts of this process. So we can flip through preparation. These are all the steps of the committee work, again, available on the district or on the board page. And then the third one is the post-committee work, which is what we will do once we have an approved recommendation from you. So our committee makeup was, we had a total of 5 voting members. We had 4 teachers and 1 parent that we recruited for this. We tried to recruit even more parents, but the good news was 1 parent could come to our meetings, but the good news was we had on our parent feedback nights, we had a really, I think it was a really great turnout from the past curriculum adoptions. We had both students and parents, and a board member, Allison, came by as well. And so we'll do a little bit, we'll give you more details on how that feedback session went later in this presentation. So we had lots of places for student, parent, and teacher feedback. And then Christy and I were 2 non-voting committee leads. So we led the work, but didn't vote on what we finalized. We were just listeners and facilitators.
So I found it important to maybe hit on our vision that we have for every art student that leaves the Napa School District, which really builds off of the mission of the Napa School District. So we hope that every student leaves with an understanding that they live in a visual world where they are creators, not just consumers, and that they are using that knowledge to be prepared for their next stage of life. Now, as we were looking at our curriculum resources, we were really trying to define 5 main areas that we were looking for. First off, both Skyview and Napa High have been a part of the standards-based adoption for assessment. So it was really imperative that our curriculum that we adopted had and aligned with our national core art standards, which I'll speak to in the next slide. We looked at the quality of resources. Were there digital resources? Were there print resources? Were there student-facing resources that we could give them? Making sure it was a 21st century curriculum, not just simply something that has been available before. We were searching to find a curriculum that also enhances our professional practice. Art is a very unique content area where oftentimes professional development connected with teaching don't actually connect with our content area. So we're hoping to find a curriculum that connected with that. The heart of art experience is to personalize every student experience. So we are hoping to search for a curriculum that allows us to do that more effectively. And then most importantly, we really want to provide endurance for our students that allow them to enter the world with a strong understanding of their own personal self. So our essential standards for the Nampa School District are the 11 anchor standards that are the National Core Art Standards. Now, the Idaho Visual Art Standards are synonymous with the National Core Art Standards. So I just thought I would supply those for you here in case you were wondering. The 4 main areas are connected to creating, performing, presenting, and producing, responding, and connecting. And we'll talk a little bit more about parent feedback, but these, without knowing the core standards, were actually what parents were most interested in and students were seeking in their art experience.
Especially the creating piece. Like we heard from students and parents both, that they want to be creating more and not just reading a textbook. Like that came up over and over and over again.
So we were able to actually review a good collection of resources, curriculum resources. We looked at the Art of Education University, Art Scholastic Magazine. Davis is an art curriculum that has been around. Textbooks are their mode of curriculum. And then School Arts is a Davis art magazine that we also looked at.
So actually, okay, so what's been done? Basically, the committee members met and completed the committee part of the work. Classroom teachers gave feedback on the resource options, and parents and community members, including students, came in on our 2 feedback sessions, and we had a really great turnout and gave a lot of excellent feedback, but you guys have access to all of that on the board documents as well. There were some really great questions asked and some really great compliments given for the direction, and also some really great pieces of advice about how to focus our art classes. So if we go to the next slide, this is just some pictures of how we set up our art feedback, because I mean, we had to show you this because it looks great. Like we did a good job. We even had chocolate all over the place, which you must have, right? You must have chocolate, you know? So we had all the things we needed to have. And this is a student and a parent that came to give feedback. That's a student going into 9th grade in one of our schools. I can't remember offhand which school, but she wrote probably like, it was like a novel of feedback. Like she wrote and wrote and wrote. So she was one of those students that came and gave really robust feedback. So I wanted to include her picture, plus she consented to have her picture taken. And her hair looks like art. It's like perfectly like, it's just beautiful. So next. This is just some snippets of parent, and I included parent feedback here as some snippets, but again, you have all the parent and student feedback. One of the things was, this is exactly what I want to see in an art program. That was encouraging. One of the great feedback pieces that caused our committee to stop and think as we considered our recommendation was the 3rd quote there. At the very, it reads, "This provides great material on current artists, recent art, etc., and it looks great, but at what point are you trying to include too much? Do you have a clear explanation for how you'll use it?" Which was a really great prompt for our teachers and our committee to think about as we're finalizing our recommendation for you. And then the last piece was, and this one really spoke to our hearts, the 4th quote there, "This is something I wish existed when I was in school." Meaning something that resonated with that person who came and gave feedback and made them feel like they wish they could go through that program as well. And that's kind of what we want for all of our kids, is we want school to be a joyful place, a place where they want to be, where they can create, where they can become more themselves and have that experience instead of sitting passively reading or just receiving information about something. I feel like I need to like.
So really our next steps are to finalize that recommendation. You'll add that to the board packet for next time and bring a recommendation to you on the 16th. Do you have questions for us?
Sometimes you bring us your choice of multiple ones that you look through, and sometimes you're like, we want all of these.
Excellent point.
What are we getting?
Within budget.
Within budget.
If you go back to that slide that has all the options, we considered a lot of stuff, and then upon parent feedback, we narrowed down what we would like to recommend to you next time. From the pool of, there was at the parent, or at the community feedback session, there was 5 tables with different options, all of which we were considering. And based on feedback, we narrowed that down to what we're gonna recommend next time. If that helps.
It does, and I apologize, I was kind of counting on your presentation to go through all the stuff. So
Okay,
if you already gave this to me, I'm just prefacing with, I apologize, I didn't read it
it's fine,
or see it.
that's fine.
Sometimes there's a little bit of a rubric too of why you chose what you chose. Is that in here? Or is
We
that
can
not?
add that. We did the highlights, the
Okay.
5 highlights, but we can add the rubric in there so you can see the
Just to
details.
kind of know why you chose.
And in
what
fact,
you
we do
want.
have it. What you have is on the parent response feedback.
Yes.
That's the rubric.
Yeah.
Parents
Okay.
and students actually responded directly on the rubric that we created as a committee. So it's not in the PowerPoint, but it is in your board documents.
The one with all the different colors.
That's
of
the one.
Feedback.
That's the one.
Okay, and so just, okay, by
Yeah.
reading in between the lines of what they said
Right.
about each one.
Correct.
Awesome.
Correct. And when we did it as teachers, we had separate squares for each teacher to give feedback. It was a little more broken down, but that's roughly the criteria and the rubric that we created.
Thank you.
And when I had chatted with you, and thank you always for your time,
Yeah.
because you are doing an adoption that touches a couple elementaries. We talked about how materials reviewing had the capacity to customize for elementary. Is that right?
That's
Am I
correct.
saying that right?
Yes,
It's not always the same for the elementary kiddos as it is for high school.
correct. Yeah, textbooks aren't super transferable, but some of the other resources we looked at can be either searched by or transferred to different grade levels. They can be adapted to meet different grade level needs. So there's a lot of that in the recommendation that we're intending to make next time.
Anything else?
When we talk, can I ask one question to you? Is that appropriate? Okay. Is there anything we haven't, we're gonna make a recommendation next time in 2 weeks or whenever the next board meeting is?
On the 16th.
Okay, on the 16th. Is there anything we haven't yet shown you that you need to see more of to be informed enough to know if it's a good recommendation or not?
I really appreciate the superintendent say it's within budget, so maybe to remind us
Yes.
what your budget
Yeah.
was
Yes.
and what that cost may association may be. Perfect.
So we do have a proposed budget worksheet that we will submit to you. Perfect. Excellent. What else? I know Allison or trustee Westfall gave you some ideas when she was at our feedback session. Is there anything else we're missing that you need from us?
I did assume the rubric like you would hit that, but just based on what I saw in here, so.
Just one thing to know that inside that budget recommendation will be recommendations for materials because art is really, we need the art materials to make all this stuff happen.
And I assume there'll be like consumables each year.
It'll be,
Yes.
it'll be inside the budget.
Will there be a broader elementary one, or is this it for art?
Right now, we have 2 more years left on our adoption cycle. So, and then we'll be preparing for the next round of adoptions. And as schools need that, well, we can leave it to that. when it's-
We were thinking pilot. We're kind of piloting because about 2 years before you do a formal adoption, you want to try some things out so that you can bring intelligence to the committee when you have your next
Yeah,
adoption.
right now, we just have the 2 that have the immediate need of access.
Thank you for your
Thank you so
time.
much. Thank you very much for all your hard work.
All right, so we did have this on the agenda. Trustees, is that ready to-
Could we take a quick, like 2-3 minute break?
Go for it, please.
Thank you. I think hopefully we all needed that break, but we're gonna resume here.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you guys. Appreciate that.
Actually, several of the next items are just prep and some heads up. So the graduation requirement revision, we actually didn't get documentation in time to make it. So what we do have in there is the original charge, so that the board, and thinking forward, when that recommendation does come, they can look to see what the committee was asked to do, so that you can see that. So that's what is present in there. There are some blanks as far as names, because this committee actually started more than 3 years ago. And then, so there have been some changes as people have come and gone. So unless you have additional questions, that's Trustee Rost is co-chair. So maybe she has something to add to that.
I was not at the last meeting, so I don't officially know all of the final, which is, I thought was a good thing. I was actually glad that staff really worked together on all that. You know, we helped collaborate all the work and everything with that last meeting where they kind of really put the finals together. And that's why Principal Yarbrough finish up those recommendations from all the lists, including myself, which I think is kind of a good thing.
And it would, yeah, I mean, and I made a call to not, Mr. Principal Yarbrough was on a family vacation and then gonna be retreating with the rest of the admin. And so I just said, let's pause and wait on that and give him time to be with his family. So yeah, so if you have questions or things, there's gonna be more, a document and a recommendation coming from the committee.
Board of Trustees meeting format. So I think Chairman Susan, you have the lead on this one.
Yeah, so I just asked Superintendent Keller and Tammy to put in here like our schedule, looking over things and kind of highlighting. We are trying new things this year. And I know we're trying to get better at not having too long meetings. And sometimes successfully and sometimes not super successfully. And so I just wanted to talk to you about the format a little bit, get some feedback from you guys, how you think things are going, and how we want to continue and progress. Because sometimes maybe one long meeting is easier than two long meetings, you know, one really long meeting, one super meeting is easier than two meetings. I also do know that Superintendent Keller and Tammy have been, and their team work diligently to get things into the packet a week ahead of time for both meetings for us. And I think with the two meetings, seems like that's on a hamster wheel, just preparing for packets and getting meetings going. And so I wanted to revisit and see what you guys were thinking and how you feel, where we're progressing, what other things do you think we need to work on, possibly?
I appreciate that. It's been, well, we're in our 8th month of trying this out. And so it's nice to kind of take a pause and look and see how things, and I didn't anticipate having to have the information in, sorry, I moved my microphone. The information in a week before, when we talked about the work session, it was like we kind of show up, it's the opportunity for us to sit and discuss. And it used to kind of be the round table in the middle of the room.
Yeah.
Of more truly a work session where we were discussing the ideas and what was about to come. I liked that. It was very comfortable to talk this way amongst us before we had to make a decision. It seems though that we have become more formal in this session. And there are times that I've felt bad, like even tonight for the presenters of the art curriculum, for example, where they did a nice presentation and I'm not in a mode to coming to this work session that I've reviewed it prior to, and I'm ready with questions. So I do feel like I am not as professional and I do them a disservice. I think that even happened at the last work session when the gentleman from the city came, and I guess I kind of came with a thought process that it would be presented. And sometimes I ask questions that if I'd read the whole packet, it's in there, but I wasn't in that mindset. But then in the same hand, just again here in the art, they said, what else have we not covered that you've heard tonight? And we came up with things that they wouldn't have been prepared for had they not come earlier. We wouldn't have said, well, what was your budget, or what were some of these things that we would have liked to have seen? So I don't know how we bridge that gap, but that's a little bit of my feedback of the pros and the cons to what we're doing.
Yeah, I'm glad you provided some additional context, because I was looking at the agenda material going, what are we talking about? And I think about kind of that vision of two meetings, one meeting we could explore something more in depth. So the levy always comes to mind, right? So ideally, you have lots of conversation about it and folks can provide impact and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think it was the nature of this past year that we were so focused on operational decisions. But the research about effective school boards in districts where, students are achieving high, they spend more time on student achievement and how are kids doing, how are our initiatives doing, and, COVID. And so I found myself a little more hungry for how are our kids doing. And I know data's probably coming.
Yeah.
And, as we shape our improvement plan, maybe deeper conversations about that. But, we've been kind of drugged more into the operational side of the house. So that was my feedback. And I was with Kim as well. I didn't think the expectation was for the work session a week ahead of time, and that we be as well versed in the materials as we should be on the action item meeting. So
Okay.
I do appreciate not too long meetings. I don't like a super meeting. I just don't. I don't think good decisions are made late into the night. Things get rushed. Sometimes tempers get short. And I just don't think that leads to good governance.
I know, so another part of it was the asking of the questions, and because of needing time to get those questions answered and information, I mean, I found actually I have less questions, because as in this format, I feel like I'm either you guys ask the questions or I ask the questions, or it's just addressed in the presentation that wasn't written in there, the question I had. And so like those things I'm checking off and not needing to ask questions. But part of it was to provide the form that then by Friday we'd submit so that leadership and has time to seek out and answer those questions. But I know sometimes getting that in by Friday is tough. And I know I intentionally put a close on the form. So if you didn't ask it by Friday, it was not available.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's another part that I just want to talk about. Yay, nay. What do we think? I know sometimes they get emailed, but I think we've done a better job of including those things so people can see them. I don't know.
Yeah, I like it. The last time I think the form didn't work for me, and maybe it's because I missed the deadline. I don't know. So I don't mind that. I do like that transparency of what questions were asked ahead of time.
I like it as well, if we can get the weekend, just my pure work schedule. I rely more on the weekends sometimes to do the extra work for the school board.
So just as a reminder, if we did that this weekend, we would get that information on Monday morning, and the board packet needs to be done by Monday at 5. And it's a turnaround that I don't know that is reasonable for us to meet.
And I think the majority of the time we are getting our questions out at the work session.
I think too, and I'm happy to, I do like the form, because a lot of times we have the same questions. I mean, even tonight, questions that got asked, like I was, oh, yep, I was wondering that same thing, right? So we don't need to all email in and individually ask the same question. Because then when it's on the form, just Superintendent Keller can see like, oh, yep, all 5 of them wanted to know this question, like, let's get that answer in there for them. But then I like the transparency and that just gets loaded right in the board packet for the week. So maybe if we can just try, we'll keep working on Friday. So I'll send again form out tonight for the things that'll have action. I know.
Or we change the expectation for the board packet.
Yeah.
True, yes, thank you,
That's a
thank you.
great idea. I was just gonna say-
There are lots of ways to look at it.
Yeah,
I just know we are feeling extremely pressured for a turnaround in 8 hours to make sure it's quality, that it's thorough, that it's been researched. It's just really not always a realistic expectation.
Because I think that's what I defer to. If I can't meet the form, I know I can still ask in open
Right.
session. And so it doesn't really help that I'm not giving you notice. And then sometimes I still just try to still do that, right? And email and give you notice. And so maybe if we change that expectation that we're getting the question in, but it can be answered at the meeting, not in the packet. I would be comfortable with that.
yeah. I think that, in my head, I'm thinking like the answer to the question, if that's gonna change my mind one way or the other, it doesn't really matter if I have it on Monday, a week before the meeting,
Right.
or at the board meeting.
And if I go back to our ISBA training, that was one thing they said is I'm giving the admin a heads up that at the meeting, I'm going to ask this question. And so if you can have that answer ready and available by the time of the meeting, that's great.
Yeah, the no surprises concept, right?
Yeah.
Does that seem like an okay switch? Are we all, if I'll set it, that you'll have it, I'll give you till 8 AM on Monday? That work? Send it tonight. We'll see how it works. And then I'm fine with that as well, if you feel like that's a good format to just respond to those questions in the meeting.
My other curiosity is how many trustees are in a regular board session reading the packet starting at 5 o'clock on Monday. So the change for us really means that packet is not ready on Monday. It's really due on Friday so that we're not working the weekend. So I'm
Right,
curious.
true.
We set that and carried that expectation. So our meetings previously were on Tuesdays, so we set Tuesday at 5. They now are on Monday.
Yeah.
And we walk in the building and then that day it's gotta be ready. So really it's pushing it so that we're not working the weekend.
Correct.
I have shared in the past that for me, just in my life, I read the packet Saturday morning. So, but I know there were other trustees who like to have the materials and reread them. So for me, materials done at, by Friday for that weekend, that works for me. But I want to respect that I know other trustees need a little more time, or if it's going to be really big, you may need
Right.
to read it 5 times.
Which is part, you'll see later, the policy series. That was part of why we gave you a heads up, because it's coming and we're doing 2 sections. I know for me, that was one thing, is that I do like to reread to make sure I get it all, because I had a wandering mind. And so sometimes on my first read, I'm thinking about float in the river and not what I'm reading, and so I gotta make sure. But I feel like in this setting, it really helps me to focus in. And actually, I do much better hearing it than reading it. So it does help me to not feel like under the gun to get things read, if that was.
And I'll just add, I do have the advantage that I know the language. I serve on another board where I don't know the language, and so my habits are different. So I think about maybe future trustees who don't know education ease or where we're headed.
Yeah.
They may need more time.
More process, yeah.
That's a good point. I'm pretty neutral on it. My schedule changes so much that I just know at some point before the meeting, I've got to read it, whether it's the Thursday before or the Monday of or the
Yeah.
weekend or somewhere in between is usually about when I get it read. I think the only time that I feel like I get caught off guard is when things are added or changed on the Monday. Other than adding things in on the Monday, and typically, historically, you would email us if that happened. It was like, oh, I added this, or I made a change to the packet, and if it's the day of. And so when that happens, it doesn't always mean I might have an opportunity to get it read that day, but then I at least might be a little bit more aware. But other than that, I'm pretty flexible.
So how do we feel about seeing how changing that day that it's due for admin? and-
What day is it due right now?
Well, really, it would be this Friday. Like, really, everything needs to be in so that Tammy probably on Monday, right? I'm assuming can start to put things in, or else she's putting it in.
Oh, I don't wait till Monday.
You don't, yeah, I didn't think you did. So she's putting things in as she gets them, which I think is having people work on the weekend, right? I mean, and not just Tammy, but whoever's getting documents for us. So, because it would be Monday night.
It might be useful to move it to Tuesday at 5, then we have Monday and Tuesday to make sure that, and we don't feel compelled to do the Saturday to make sure that it's ready to go. We do Saturdays all the time anyway. But
I know that.
To do that regularly because of routine, and particularly if that still would give Trustee Simpson, something like you would just begin to read on Tuesday.
Yes.
And then you could reread it on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and Saturday and Sunday, and it would give us a little more flexibility.
Does that seem?
It does. I think if we're going to be able to continue with the workshop, hearing those big items 2 weeks before, then shortening that time to 6 days versus 7 or 8 is absolutely reasonable. And I think for me, I'm good with the knowing the Tuesday night before the Monday meeting.
Yeah. And I think, just to be clear, that our expectation has been there are some things like the personnel report. And I think some of the financials just
That
come in.
sometimes have to be updated, yeah, on the time based on the.
The switch to the new schedule, I think your financials are in on time, really.
I think
So
they are,
usually the first
yeah,
thing is
Yeah,
Yeah.
noticed.
yeah. Excellent. Thank you, and I will, I'll keep asking and we'll
Thank you.
keep refining and.
Yeah, thanks.
And working through it. Excellent.
All right, so Clerk Wallen put in here for you the template that the State Board of Education, so we had Representative Kirby come and talk about some things. We wanted you to see the shape of the template. The board also has given us an example of the CIP, remembering that our habit here, that document for compliance state does have to be done.
Yeah.
But we weren't able, honestly, because we still are in some revision opportunities. So we don't have a lot of that information ready to go. The other piece that we generally always talk about is really what we would call the strategic plan, the working strategic plan, where our 7 strategic goals live. And so I think our hope is to have some discussion on the 16th, but also do a work session in September. So that you have a second meeting in September if you would like to have more discussion on it. And in that meeting, we do have to approve it to meet the October 1 deadline. But so we felt like the only thing we could really key you up on right now is currently the form. I heard today that IASA actually has tweaked the form again, so I haven't seen that document. And I'm not sure if they've worked with the state board or not.
The one we're looking at, they've tweaked again.
That was my understanding today from Andy Grover.
That's not helpful.
There are. just
We
as a
like to
re-
build planes in the air in education.
Yeah, and just as a reminder connected to this, if you remember, one of our most challenging places will be in that last section where we have to represent the student achievement goal of every teacher in this district. In addition to that, the law, as it was changed, has asked the Board of Trustees to approve those. We're trying to work through that. Because generally the trustees don't approve a classroom level goal, which is all of those.
Yeah.
And so it feels a little uncertain. And then here's how it goes. I sit down with you, Trustee Simpson, because I'm evaluating you and we talk about the data and we say, hey, we're working on this. And you say, this is really what I want. And so there's this agreement, there's this plan that's put in place. And then I think somehow we're going to have to collect that and bring it to you for your approval. Which, we're just trying to work through those details. And we're talking with other superintendents and other folks, but it feels a little awkward, particularly since you don't have the ability to sit down with 960 teachers and have those same conversations. That's really our admin that do that. But we'll figure it out.
Yeah,
As it
somehow.
should be. I mean,
and I was wondering about that, how do we comply? Do we just approve a framework and knowing, and arrange with the expectation that people improved and it's identified in your evaluation, so we connect it to our evaluation policy?
I was wondering the same thing
Just
because
big,
I don't,
broad.
yeah.
Just the language that they wrote makes us think, we had talked about, well, most of our K-3 do something with IRI because that literacy is just really foundational and we talk about growth and we do that. So there is this commonality, but it looks different, right? Some of them are really focusing on our students that are absolutely not proficient and trying to move them there. Some of them are talking about are proficient and moving them further. And so there's some nuances related to that. So I think it's going to be on interpretation, and that's just a heads up. We're still working through what that looks like and how that is. So we'll have to work together on making sense of that.
Yeah, do you think then there's some flexibility for us to just do the NAMPA way?
I'm hoping there might be.
I mean, because I just keep thinking, I know we have small districts in the state where this may not be so cumbersome a task, right? Because they don't have the amount of staff and the amount of educators, but I feel like there's enough districts that are bigger that.
We have to include, Ms. Wilkinson back
Yeah.
in the art class at Nampa High, and she may be focusing on pottery and something, and then our art teacher, Tina over at Skyview, she's maybe focusing on paint, those type
Yeah.
of things. So there's going to be a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm interested.
And we're
I
trying to
think
figure out how to collect it easy.
I like what Allison was saying, that like it's part of, here's our policy, here's the process, not so much the process, but our administrators are going to be working through with their staff to create those goals and make sure that they're there and collected and that's who should be doing the the work anyway, is working to set those goals.
When I hear what you're saying, and I'm thinking back to his presentation, and he was talked a lot about that our goals at the top, we should at least be aware of the classroom goals so that we know we're all in alignment, we're going the same direction. And so if we go the route that I think I'm hearing you suggest, then we aren't aware of the classroom goals. And potentially we don't get every elective, but we get reading or writing.
The law says everything.
Yeah.
So that, or, and when I look through this form, I see a lot of the percent proficient, our percent growth, those kinds of things as well. But I think just as I was hearing us talk, it seemed like we wanted to go back to being more at arm's length. When he was explaining it, he wanted us more, not involved like we're helping make the plan, just being aware of what it is.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, so I heard him too, we want
Okay.
everybody rowing in the same direction. And so in my head, I was thinking, so, we've been leaning into math.
Okay.
So we have a district math goal, what does it look like at school level? And then we want teachers, we want to see improvement, so what's the range? But, maybe there's a teacher, there probably is in our district, 95% of the kiddos are where they need to be. So that goal is going to look a little different for, I imagine, not being a teacher evaluating, but to another teacher where results are not like that. I don't know that as a board we need to see all of those. We do have policy that directs in an evaluation. They're working with their administrator on those things. And hit me if I'm not making sense, but what's the framework that keeps us paddling in the same direction, that we have a math goal or whatever it is? He surprised me in the presentation. So I've been trying to think about, what would a board role be in a large district to keep us rowing in the same direction, but not buried at the board level in the minutia. Does that make sense?
It was, and I agree. It's being aware and then being creative literally at the same time. And I agree. I think it's
Even within our math goals, if you were approving them, you have to understand the subpoints that are in between there, and that this teacher really looking at her data is really going to work on place value because to the kids that she's working right now. So that's going to look different than if we're talking about some other concepts that we're looking at. There's even within that 5th grade math curriculum, if we're doing our job, looking at where our kids are starting, where they need to be, and aligning those goals, we're going to have 960 independent goals.
As you should. Because if we set a math 9 goal, I mean, that's silly that we're gonna, because then we're setting a math 9 goal for all our math 9th grade math teachers and then all their students, and supposing that they're all in the same cookie cutter place, and they're not, and we know that. I mean, so that's what really gets difficult. But I mean, yeah, I'm hoping we can work through it and see. I don't know that it means that we have blinders on and closed to that. Because I hear what you were saying,
what
like,
an ample way was, or
No,
yeah,
it meant it.
yeah. She's just saying creative.
I thought there were a lot more
Yeah.
acronyms. I wasn't
Oh, no.
aware of.
Let's find our way.
Say, here's our benchmark. Okay, and now are we wanting 10% more? What's realistic? Can we have 15% more? And then what our admin and our teachers do is they dig in there and to say, where are our kids at? How are we going to move them? And they get into that detail and that minutia. They plan strong instructional strategies. They intervene in tier 2 and kids still don't get that. And all through that process could be instructional academic goals that a teacher could use in their evaluation. Yeah. So that's just a heads up on that.
And this has to be completed by when?
October 1st.
Is this the same
October 1st conversation with the ESSER funds, or is that different?
Different.
Is this an opportunity to understand that or not?
No, so this is our, continuous improvement plan,
Okay, which is always October 1st.
which is always.
That's
yeah,
why that's different.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
And then the last agenda item.
Yes.
And we gave you a heads up on this one and say, hey, the expectation isn't at all for you to have gone through 8,000 and 9,000, but it's due in September. So we wanted you to have the opportunity starting now to know that those materials are available so that you could start moving through them. 8,000 is much more robust than 9,000. So that's why I think those two policy sections were combined.
Yes.
Many of these fall under Mr. Jernison's jurisdiction, and he and his team are also going through those and reviewing those for accuracy and, old law or new law, et cetera, et cetera. So this was just, and we believe at this point you all have access to that, and that's what this moment was, for you to confirm that, so that as you have time, you can dig into it.
So I have a question, because I wasn't sure if the NA was on so I was looking at the coding, and I don't remember 4 things, but I didn't go back and look at the previous, so I apologize on that, but talk to me about how, and there may very well be a difference, I'm just not seeing the difference between reviewed and okay, the first one, the X, versus the NA, which is not interested in adding.
Yeah, so I think the not interested in adding would be, we currently don't have district policy, but ISBA does.
Thank
When
you.
you read it, you
Yeah.
will say, yeah, I don't want to go there.
Perfect. I was like, wait, okay, if I don't want to add anything, then I'd just say I reviewed it. But I get it now. Thank you. I knew there was a small piece I was not connecting. Any questions on this? And so again, this will be in the September work session. So we'll have had it for a month, which I think is good and helpful, because there's a lot there for us to go through. Okay.
I think finances, 7,000 is after that, and Mr. Dewey is already working on queuing that one up. I
Okay.
think that follows, well, it actually might be 1,000, so we probably need to talk about it, because you just reviewed 1,000, because we got a little confused. So you may have a month break before we hit the 7,000 series.
Okay.
Remember, also, I think we agreed that we would review those annual ones that are required
Yes.
and so.
Yes.
It's all that.
Any other questions or
Do
comments
we,
on this?
at the time of September, do we want to have redlined what we think revisions we might be looking for, or just that that's one we want to
So
dive deeper into next time? Because then from
That's a
there, we
good
narrow
question,
down the
yeah.
list,
So the
right?
documents we've shared with you are, the ISBA's are docs. So I guess they could be edited. It is a PDF. So I don't think they're editable for you.
So I think for the first round, it's just saying you may or may not have a comment and putting
Yeah.
the numbers in there, but and then deciding
And
as
we
a
listen to
group
you and we say, oh, we need to work on this
If-
one or that one.
if we even want to include it or not, so not to have to go that far
Yeah.
into what your revisions you're requesting.
Yeah.
Okay,
And I feel like that, because then it's still even in that first meeting in September, remember, we still aren't even at first read phase. That's just within the work session.
Yeah,
So,
you remember
so we
one-
can add and say, here's what we're thinking. And then if red line things are then brought back to us during the first read, it's really still just a first read, but we can hone in. That's not quite what, similar to what
Okay.
things we looked at
We
today.
actually tackled it in 3 ways. One of them, because this is just a review.
Right,
remember?
yes.
One of them, you didn't have questions on, and we just listed those as reviewed and
reviewed.
done.
Yes.
And then we had the red line, here's our current ones that we'd like to see edited, and here are the first read suggestions. And then that third group, if you remember, if we're going to create policy, we have to look at it, we have to go out for public comment and then bring it back. So it kind of lags.
Yes.
in Bringing that
Bringing it
forward.
back. That's right. Excellent.
Perfect.
Excellent. We are adjourned.
Ooh.